What's up, folks? We're back with the Zero project, and I have some pretty cool things I want to show you. Also, since the last devlog, we've hit 20K. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you. In this devlog, we're going to continue focusing on Zero's sub weapons. We already have the Buster, which gives Zero some ranged options, the Boomerang Shield, which gives Zero some defensive options, the Recoil Rod, which is an offense-focused weapon that allows Zero to dash in the air, and our first iteration of the Triple Rod, which originally was a wide-swinging offensive option for Zero. In this devlog, we're going to focus on changes made to the Triple Rod, we're going to add the Chain Rod, and we're going to lay the groundwork for the Z-Knuckle. This one's going to be a little different. We're going to try to go a little bit more into detail as far as how certain things were added, since this is a devlog after all. We have a bit to cover, but first check this out. Your location, operating system, hardware details, and your browsing history. You know, things that you would normally want to keep to yourself, right? Well, here's the thing. That's the type of information that websites have access to when you visit them. Now, of course, if it's a trusted site, then that's not an issue. But let's be real. All the sites you visit aren't trustworthy, nor is public Wi-Fi. You wouldn't go around giving your personal information to strangers, right? Well, the same goes for your device's information. And that's where today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, comes in. It's the most affordable VPN to keep your information protected and yourself anonymous on as many devices as you want. But there's more. Surfshark VPN allows you to change the location that you want your device to come from, allowing you to not only keep your information safe, but also allowing you to view movies, TV shows, sporting events, buy tickets, things that aren't available in your country. For example, while working on this project, I like to sometimes switch my location over to the UK so I can watch my favorite Studio Ghibli films over on Netflix, which might be all of them. So give it a try. Just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link down in the description and use my promo code Keely for 3 extra months for free. And if you find a better VPN solution for all of your devices with 24/7 support, Surfshark VPN has a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Now back to the devlog. Alright, so as I said in the last devlog, I wasn't really satisfied with how the Triple Rod was set up. In the official games, it's purely a poking weapon, and I wanted to do more with it than that. So I made it a slow swinging slashing weapon instead, with a wide range of attack. But this raised the question, what would I do with the Chain Rod? Because at that point, I wasn't even sure how I was going to handle the Chain Rod at all. But now that I do know, it's become clear that the Triple Rod can go back to being a piercing weapon, since the Chain Rod will be taking over the role of a wide slashing weapon. The Triple Rod now has some new poking animations, but I kept a big swing as the last attack in the combo string. Once more enemy types are added, I'll be setting this up to pierce defenses. Finally, on the visual side, I added a particle effect to emphasize the strikes. And one more thing that I want to add in the future though, is the downward strike from the OG games and the ability to bounce off of enemies. But for now, this will do. With the Triple Rod changes in place, the next task was to implement the Chain Rod. One of the challenges that originally made me hesitant on handling the Chain Rod was how to handle its whip-like animation. In official artwork, the Chain Rod is clearly a whip, but in the OG games, functionally, is just the Triple Rod 2.0. They both have poking attacks and even have the same charged attack. The only difference is the Chain Rod's ability to grapple enemies and move Zero around. So I checked the asset store to find some whip animations because remember, I'm not an animator, and I found this one that seemed pretty cool. I started retargeting these animations to Zero, and while his body moved correctly, the whip didn't. Turns out, while Zero's rig properly retargeted the animation, Unity didn't recognize the whip's bones, which is why their names are yellow here. It's basically saying that the animator can't find the object based on the hierarchy, like a file path. And one solution is to manually go into each property of the animation and fix the hierarchy by renaming each property to match the name of the object in the rig. It takes a long time. So I began looking for a way to streamline the process and came across this abandoned project on GitHub. It's a tool for Unity that will take an animation and check an object's hierarchy to find all the bones referenced in that animation using a visual interface. It also has the option to manually type out the hierarchy path to the missing object, but this is the exact thing I was trying to avoid. So after testing a bit, I realized that it was working, but not exactly how I needed. So I made some tweaks to the tool's code to get it working. Since the project is abandoned according to GitHub, I may try to fine tune it and release it in the future. Anyway, once that was done, the next thing to do was to set up the visuals for the Chain Rod. I used the Saber's Blade model as the tip of the whip and modified it in Blender to make the smaller segments. Then I removed the mesh renderer from the original whip model and put the blades as child objects in the whip's rig. Next was to add the remaining attacks. At this point, I was satisfied with how Zero moved during the attacks, but the appearance of the whip was bothering me a bit. In the OG games, the segments are attached with these gray circles, and in the official artwork, they're completely connected with no empty spaces between the sections. I tried the spear idea first. The plan was to have each one's location handled with code that would get the midpoint between the two blades. This kind of worked, but the positions were off.
Why, Shug?
After checking frame by frame, I noticed that the code was actually doing its job, but the positions were behind by 1 frame. This is because Unity updates the positions of objects in an animation before the update method is called on scripts. The solution was to check for the object's positions in the late update method. That way, I could grab the positions of the blades before the animator updated them next frame. Now it works. But visually, it still didn't sit right with me, so I scrapped the idea. Instead, I went with a line renderer that uses each blade as a point within that line. This gave the chain rod a bit more of a full appearance. Now, there was one more thing I wanted to add to the chain rod before moving on to the Z-Knuckle: grappling. As some of you picked up from the music I used in the last devlog and what served as inspiration for how the shield boomerang counter works, I play a lot of PSO2, so I used the Wired Lance's weapon action as inspiration for how the chain rod's grapple functions, as far as combat is concerned at least. When locked onto an enemy, Zero can latch onto them as long as they're within range, then pull himself toward them, performing a backflip kick once he reaches them that sets up for follow-up attacks.
Yo, you wanna learn how to do a f***ing infinite?
As far as using the chain rod for a traversal, that'll be handled once we get to the level designs.
Meanwhile,
Watch this guy combo.
Now for the Z-Knuckle. In the OG games, this sub-weapon's primary function was to take weapons from enemies, allowing Zero to use them for himself. Given the way the combat system works in this project, I wanted to do more with it than just that. And because of that, Zero throws hands. As far as the visuals are concerned, this sub-weapon is just a glowing Z on Zero's palm, but for this project, I placed a ring around his wrist instead. I also added a trail renderer when he punches. He also has a new dash attack when using the Z-Knuckle that pops the enemy into the air. At this point, I thought to myself, this is cool, but he can do more than that, so I added kicks as well. This idea was kind of inspired by how Tifa played in Final Fantasy VII Remake. The idea that I currently have in mind is to make the Z-Knuckle its own self-contained weapon, so pressing the main attack button will do punches instead of bringing out the saber, and the sub-weapon button will do kicks. I noticed that the trail renderers were also starting to get a bit distracting, so I added some code that only enables the renderer of the limb that's striking. Now, to keep the whole self-contained idea going, Zero now has access to 3 new EX moves while the Z-Knuckle is equipped. The first is the Hadouken. This gives Zero a ranged option while using the Z-Knuckle without needing to take something from the enemy. Right now, it's just a stretched spear with some particles onto it and does a light hit to the enemy. Next up is the Tatsumaki, which essentially serves as a combo string extender that hits 3 times. I'm considering making the 3rd hit more of a knockback. And finally, we have the Shoryuken. This one's a launcher, and if used in the air, it does not move Zero upward. With the functionality done, I took the visual effects a bit and added some new icons on the UI. Alright, so that's what we have so far. I'm happy with how the chain rod turned out, but the Z-Knuckle still needs a bit of work because we still have to add the ability stealing, but we'll get to that once we start adding more enemies for Zero to steal abilities from. But for right now, I think it's cool to see Zero throw hands. I definitely appreciate your patience as I roll these out and as I try new content, like the last upload. And like I said earlier, this devlog was a little different. I tried to go a bit more into detail about how I approach certain challenges I faced with this project. And part 5 is definitely coming a lot sooner than part 4 did. As always, thank you to all my patrons. You all are the real MVPs. And another thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment and start protecting your information online today. But that's going to be it for... Well, I'm now joined by my co-host Lily. Any of y'all got spoiled dogs. But that's going to be it for this one. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.